So you have 811, which is, highly defined what their best practices are for each one of those guys that goes out and does that work. And then you've got Sue, and then you've got this wild, wild west in the middle where you can't really ensure that anybody's actually doing the right thing, right? Using the right technologies. Sure. And then if you look at regular specifications by large contractors, there's a deficit in education there where they're just saying, locate all underground utilities before excavation.
Right.
Right. So that's incredibly broad. And,
Very.
And, how do you interpret that? Depends on who you are and how you want to operate your excavation company or directional drilling, right?
Yeah.
And
what level of risk are you willing to accept?
Exactly, right.
Exactly.
In the underground utility construction business, the location of pipes and cables is important to everyone on the job, whether you're a locator or not. Contractors take the blame for damages about 95% of the time, so it's in their best interest to be knowledgeable of how utility systems work, so they can double-check their locate and avoid hitting anything. As of right now, the people who do the locating fall into 4 categories: public, private, Sue, and crew. Public locating is 811, state damage prevention law mandated. Private is private locate companies who locate utilities not required to be located by state damage prevention law. SUE stands for Subsurface Utility Engineering, engineers who are hired to provide locating, potholing, surveying, and mapping for all underground utility lines. And crew, utility contractors who do their own locates to double-check the 811 marks, as well as locate private lines. There is no doubt that learning and logging the location of underground utilities could be ran in a much more smooth and organized manner, and this is known by people who work in the business every day. At Planet Underground's The Roundtable, we bring those people together from all sides of the industry to talk with each other about the barriers and challenges they face out in the field. We are at an interesting point in the locating industry because we have developing technologies that have the capability to change how work is done. This is a good thing, but it's important that everyone learns to adapt to these changes and technologies. And like most things in life, it starts with education. We can establish standards for locators and contractors across the board in hopes to filter out the unqualified workers, therefore reducing damages. But until everyone in the field has proper training and education of how underground utility systems work, we may not see much change in the damage rate. And this education must be continual throughout everyone's careers. As you will see in these discussions at the round table, it is not just locators who need to know where all the utilities are, it's everyone involved. And whether you are public, private, SUE, or crew, you all speak the same language, and that is the language of locating.
Realistically, I think, it's going to be a while before we really see anything close to zero damages. And there's a lot of factors at play insofar as, people are variables. And the one locator that's got the same training as another technician, they might not be the same. They might have an off day or a long weekend or something that they weren't in the right frame of mind, they made a mistake. So I think the more we can abstract that type of variable situation from the equation and interject technology, I think that's probably our best possible hope.
To me, it gives me a warm and fuzzy in both sides. Yeah, if I was an excavator and a locator, because the human element is now added in there, where someone actually, you know, physically went to the site, they did their visual scan of the area, and determined based on what my data tells me and what I'm seeing, it all matches up. I'm okay to clear. Now, the prints are only a guide, right?
Yeah.
But in many cases, you don't know how old the print is. There could be new installations that weren't put on the print, and that's the whole purpose of it. The human element I think is always going to be there until someday robots are invented or whatever to do this stuff for us, right?
You know, like you said, the number of damages has gone up year after year for the last 5 years, but I know from Pennsylvania standpoint, like, we didn't have required reporting. I can tell you just from being in the business, like, if we found a water service off the mark by 5 feet and we didn't hit it, we didn't break it, we found it, like, we're not reporting that. Like, I'm not going to spend another 45 minutes of my time to report that to the proper people, filling out the proper documentation and all that stuff. It's not feasible. So I agree that the numbers are going up, but I think that that's just kind of the numbers. It might not necessarily be the reality of what's going on. I think that, you know, utilizing technology in the next 10 years, if everybody committed to it and really committed to the technology piece of it versus just everybody trying to get through the day of, I got 100 locates or I'm trying to dig in 15 spots or whatever, and everybody committed to that technology. I mean, in the next 10, think about where we were with technology 10 years ago, to try and have a goal to be in 10 years to get to a point where there's a system that's readily available to all the people it needs to be, that's accurate.
You can't prove what you can't measure.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. And if you have that same thing, it goes in the reverse. Not only are you giving me that technology in my hand, but then when I find something in the field, like, I can locate it. Here's the water main. It's right here.
I mean, what's the definition of insanity? Just doing the same thing and expecting a different result?
Yep.
I feel like, you know, we have to continue to evolve how we think about these things.
There should be some sort of specification, some sort of a clean break between the private locator and the SUE provider. Should there be another standard for the private locator? Because right now, you know, if all of a sudden I want to buy a truck and the equipment, I could go out and call myself a private locator.
Right.
And there's nobody policing my quality other than the industry and my clients, right? So,
right. If you promise falsely to that client, whether it's you don't have the experience to know what you're doing, or whether it's, hey, we're this level but we're not, if there is no legal issue there, they're probably still not going to get a call back at a later date. So yes, I think there could be an advantage to having a standard at some point. I think it's something the industry will probably push for eventually. But right now it's totally market driven for both instances.
Yeah, there's certain sectors or part of the sector, the actors in this group, that feel like they may get compromised. You know, locators say for instance, you know, oh, you know, we're going to lose out. We're not going to have locate jobs anymore. Well, that's not the case, right? So I think the thing is going through and looking at who are the actors at play. Utilities, oh, it's going to cost us more money. Locators, oh, we're not going to have as many jobs. And then contractors, oh, we're going to take on liability. I think we've got to get those people in the room and start talking seriously about, well, no, it's not going to be that. It's none of those things. It's all scaremongering, right? You're just scared of change.
Yeah, resistant.
Resistant to change. So let's get in a room and talk about, hey, imagine if we could move this. It's going to be more work for locators, easier for you contractors, easier for you, Mr. Utility. I mean, I'm going to see utilities probably asking for data to come in future contracts from locators maybe, and then maybe even from their subcontractors. Like, why isn't, when the ground's open, the contractor then GNSS, you know, high accuracy across the pipe, across the infrastructure, every single hole they dig.
Check the box.
Check the box.
Wow.
So locators doing it, that's great. That tells me, great, this is where I think it is. Now I open the ground, oh, there it is.
Well, for our side of it, I'll take it to the asset owners and say it's not only the dollars, sometimes even the scope of work that they'll cut a corner like. So for us, we're actually located. We're trying to figure out what's under there to prevent damage. That's what we do. And often a utility owner will say, that corner house, we stopped the line here, you don't need to do that corner house. But you don't know how those lines go truly underground. But to save a buck, to save time, save this and that, they'll say, you know, don't do it. You know, and so I think it starts right at the top, like they said. I think it starts right at the asset owners, and it just keeps going. What's an extra 5% to make sure the damage prevention is there?
And I
Up
think
down the line.
Some people believe the 811 system is outdated. Whether this way of thinking is influenced by the extremely high volume of tickets, poor utility records, lack of easily defined dig extents, the number of abandoned lines, the crowded right-of-ways, or something else, there's more call for change in how we manage locating now than any time in the past. No utility's damage prevention program is unaffected by the construction and practices of each and every utility in the right-of-way. For this reason, damage prevention in the future is going to require a lot more sharing of information between the stakeholders, including how and when people are able to access this information. Contractors are the ones who take the burden for majority of damages, but they aren't always provided the best information available, and that needs to change. It's going to take some legislation and enforcement, but the system has the capability to run a lot smoother than it does today. We can look at how other countries operate, as well as learn from them. The technology available today was never there when the 811 system was created in the early 70s. It's time we get all stakeholders together and fix it. Plus, keep in mind that it's possible that over half of all buried pipes and cables are private lines.
You're right, a lot of these laws are outdated, like extremely. What Gerald was talking about is very hard on utility locating companies. Massive neighborhoods getting overtaken. Get it done in 48 hours. What are you going to do? And between all these real locating companies taking it serious, we are rolling people in on planes from all over the United States to take care of these big projects where we're almost at a demand, but we're pleading with these legislatures to do something different, and then ask the one call centers to help us enforce. You know, hey, don't let them do that. Don't let them call all that in.
Located, it's not a regulated service. So, you know, you could go out tomorrow, anybody here could go out tomorrow and purchase locating equipment on the internet and call themselves an expert in the industry and start doing it. The issue with that is there is no standardized process or training that needs to be adhered to in order to make sure that the locates are accurate. So by doing that, not only can we limit damages, okay, but then again requiring some sort of deliverables that come afterwards.
Because a $10 ticket means whoever's got the money will just pay for it and just keep offending, right?
Yeah.
Who cares? If it was $50,000 or $5,000 for a speeding ticket, I tell you, you watch how quickly speeding would change if you had a $5,000 ticket. I mean, no one would like that, but the first 100 or 200 people, it'd be news every day, and then all of a sudden, culturally, and that's how in Australia, Victoria managed theirs. Their fines are horrific. So you get caught speeding, it's not just on a small, oversight. You're going to get hit nationally. So you tend not to speed. So I think the fine value is interesting. What I don't like about fine values being so high is where does that money go to? Because it's got to feed back and get back into education and programs to help, drive people and educate them on what they're doing, as opposed to going into the coffers. It just depends where the money goes. Yeah.
What I find most effective is somewhat of a tiered system. So, first time, maybe a warning. Second time, the next time, it's a $2,000 fine, and you're required to send your employees for education.
Yes.
To your point, that money from those fines should go towards educating everybody.
Yeah.
Facility owners, contractors, homeowners, whatever it may be. That money should go back towards the education and not into someone's pocket.
Yeah, sure.
Agreed.
I think in the past, companies have tracked their damage information, but they've not shared it. And now that we're in a more shared environment and readily available, I know from the one call perspective, it allows us to now pinpoint the target where we need to promote and educate people that are causing damages.
Who's making these damages? Who doesn't have a best practice within their organization? Let's connect with them and mitigate those. Before, we didn't have the stats
Right.
to be able to say, who do I talk to? So it was just a shotgun approach. Now it's a more targeted approach to be able to do that education. But I think the next piece is, what are we going to do with the information? And what's the best course of action with the information?
You know, I know that if there's a fence ticket, if there's a fiber job or a board job going on, or a water or sewer project, those are going to be my 4 jobs that are going to be at the highest risk of a damage, highest incidence of a damage. There needs to be some sort of assessment, objective assessment, to get us back to what Tracy said, which is improving those best practices and then getting people to utilize them. We know that when people utilize best practices, that you're going to have less incidents. So if people aren't educated or not exposed to that information, which is where collecting that data helps, then they wouldn't know to employ it anyway.
My number one thing in enforcing these damage prevention, when I sat down thinking of this, is the education of everybody first, foremost, and them doing that through January and February when it's slower and everybody comes in and goes through an educational process. James Wingate's here, and he's been to a number of them with me before he transferred to California. Has largely impacted the laws being followed, having buy-in from everybody, understanding, and then communication, getting out to everybody and working together. But just back to that point, the white lining that happened there really, really helped out. That's why I brought it up to start.
This episode of Planet Underground is brought to you by...
I actually was online one night. I saw they had a video and they were talking about Point Man and how basically it was integrated external GPS and app and RD8100, and they were able to capture sub-centimeter accuracy. And I was like, wow, and was able to go out into the field and do just that, actually get that sub-centimeter accuracy, was able to collect the X, Y, Z, and Z locations and document them in a file. And again, I just was hoping to just tie it all together, but they gave me so much more.
Yes, the 811 system may need restructuring, but ultimately, what we need most is industry-specific education that is easily accessible to all stakeholders. Wouldn't contractors who specifically work with gas utilities benefit from learning about how telecom, electric, and water systems work too? Wouldn't a drafting engineer who never leaves an office be better at their job if they could identify utilities only using their eyes? Locators and excavators pick up this knowledge through years of practice out in the field. But should it take years? Can't we provide a better head start for everyone? The good news is, for the first time in the world, there is a platform where you can learn the knowledge of locating and underground utility systems. From China to Australia to the US, the language of locating is universal, and everyone needs to know it.
As a utility owner, that's something that we're looking at now. How do you weigh those criteria? And what's important? Of course, cost is important to everybody,
Right.
but that's not the most important thing. So maybe cost is up there, but then again, maybe damage prevention and safety is up there. So is that weighed the same? It should be, but it's not always going to. But that's something that utility owners should be taking into consideration.
I think with the old school thinking of just 811 is the middle person. They get the information and then they send it out. It's I think there's some barriers that need to be lifted in order for them to realize what it takes to do the work.
It's not just there's, hey, a ticket, to your point, it's all tickets created equal. Not only is it not that fact, but it's also they all come at these ebbs and flows, right? And the peaks and the valleys. And in order to take that data, you almost have to know where that's happening in the cycle, right? That's an attribute of the data. Is this ticket coming in a peak or is it coming in a valley? That has a lot to determine how you actually handle the ticket. and how long it took you, right? And you'll actually start to see some damage profiles coming out there as well as you use the data, right? In those peaks, right? As you can imagine, you start to have more damages occurring, and so that data is extremely valuable to tell us when you need to throttle, slow down, go fast. It's a difficult business, but we're embracing the data, and we're upgrading our system to make sure that we can use that data more effectively to make better decisions.
I mean, we have permanent records right now but they're hand drawn, not totally accurate, personal perceptions, that kind of thing. So once we have that other data, I might have found a GPS point right here, and then the next one 25, 30 feet away. What happened in between those 2 points? So in order to do that, I think it has to have that education too, that these are not collected inch by inch, foot by foot. There's a span, because a lot can happen in 25 feet in the utilities. Absolutely. Up, over, down, whatever it is.
Most of the time, in fact, there are many scopes and specifications that require the directional drillers to expose the facilities, even though we may have gone out and provided that map and indicated, at least up through quality level B where that facility is. They still, by their scope, have to expose it because we're affixing a seal, because we are putting professional licensure on the line, and we're backing it up with errors and omissions, insurance, and so on, professional liability, that we have to do the amount of investigation necessary using the technologies that are available to us to provide the most
comprehensive
and concise picture of what's there in order to do those things exactly, and protect the client, protect the public, and protect our license.
So, John, you're the only excavator on this panel, on this roundtable,
yeah,
right?
I am.
What other services do you use? So you call 811 when you get to a congested area. Do you use other services like private locators or subsurface utility engineering that augment the standard 811 service in these congested areas? Or how do you see that going in the future?
So at this point right now, majority of our crews, we do the law with the 811, call for the locates, and majority of our crews actually have their private locators also. So if we feel that a service is mismarked, unmarked, or if there's anything as far as indicators that we see that a utility is not in the direction or where it should be, or we have a indicator, a pedestal, a B box, a buffalo box, our foreman actually go out and do their locating also for that utility. And we have something what we call a safety sweep. Safety sweep just meaning just walking your job site, walking the path for the installation. If you see any indicator, a B-box or a pedestal or a lateral or anything of that nature, we just ask our foreman to do their diligence also. Not just put it in the hands of the locator, but we're actually going to help out the locator and do our part also in the world of damage prevention.
What's interesting today is utilities are sending out locators, and then contractors are going and buying their own locators to validate the stuff that utilities do. And why do they do that?
Great for business.
Because the quality of the locate maybe by the utility is not as good as they want, right? They want a much more highly accurate locator.
You're not working with the right people.
Well, maybe. So maybe that combination of things is where some people say, yesterday we were talking about going above and beyond the legislation, right? Whatever's normal. And a lot of companies saying we do that. We sort of take we already do that. We go way above and beyond. We go and we have our own guys, or we use a third party to come and locate what a utility's located as.
Using your best tool that you have for damage prevention, which is your eyes, right? Go out and walk that job site. If you can't, afford that private locator or that expensive locator, just use your eyes. Just you see something in the path of your installation that may not be unmarked or mismarked. That's a reason. I'm not a reason, but that's a time when that's an opportunity to call timeout. Yeah. Just to let the locator come back to see, or your supervisor come back to see the job site, or give you some indicators of, I know something's in this path. I don't want to start digging just yet to shrink this utility. So I want to make sure that I'm doing it right and correctly. my eyes are telling me something, and if you have that your eyes as far as your best damage prevention tools, you can't go wrong.
You can definitely pick up a lot of above ground visual cues and infer things about what may be happening underneath. That's like offline discussion we were having about witching sticks. I mean, that's the premise there. I mean, they work. You know, you can go out, and if you know enough about utility infrastructure, you can determine where the utilities are, whether you're subconsciously aligning sticks using the ideal motor effect, or whether you're just painting them on the ground. It's going to work pretty well, but it's all about picking up above ground cues and knowing what's likely to be buried.